All right, I feel like Ricky Wendell. Where's Vino? Vino's got his mask. Oliver, you've got everything, and you are walking sanitizer. Leroy, you've got gloves on. I feel like we're getting ready to prepare the astronauts to go to when they're coming back from the moon. You know how they're in the chamber there. They cannot be essentially with anyone. They're in an isolation chamber for 30 days. I feel that we are probably, Leroy, courtesy of you, the most sanitized, the absolute most sanitized Oliver studio on the planet. Well, the Hutchinson Report Town Hall today is going to focus on one aspect of the COVID-19 crisis: resources, resources, resources. Our underserved communities, African Americans, Hispanics, people of color, and underserved community, the poor everywhere, are they going to be front and center at the table when the resources are ladled out? We want to make sure underserved communities are right there. Okay, we have Dr. Richardson on the line. Dr. Richardson, are you there? Dr. Richardson?
Yes, hello.
Okay, Dr. Richardson, how are you?
I'm well today. How are you?
Very good, and thank you for joining us on the Hutchinson Report from Atlanta. Dr. Richardson, Morehouse, as we well know, has been front and center, not just during the COVID crisis, but also on many of the public health policy issues and public health, certainly initiatives, and we want to take our hat off to you.
Yes. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm proud and pleased to have the opportunity to represent Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta. The messages that I would like to share, I can sum in 3 points and then with a summary statement. And this is based on my conversations with folks in the community and my observations of things like social media posts and things like that. So the first thing I'd like to say is this is not a hoax. It is not a conspiracy. This is a biological phenomenon. This is science. And so what happens with this type of virus is actually very common in animals and people. The second point is when you have a new virus, and there are people who, for a living, track viruses and try to get ahead of this kind of thing. But when you have a new virus, there are 3 things you can do. You can vaccinate. But vaccinations are only helpful after they're created, which means you have to learn. Scientists have to learn. They have to do clinical trials. That takes some time. And you've heard on the news that there is some time involved, but they are rapidly attempting to identify a vaccination against this particular virus. The second thing you can do is containment. Now, in order to do containment, there has to be testing. And I don't need to rehash what we've seen in terms of our response to testing. You cannot test if you don't have the test. The tests are to identify the cases, those positive cases. Those positive cases then are to be isolated so that they no longer spread the virus. And then the tracing or the contact tracing or the people that person encountered are then quarantined for 14 days. The second aspect of prevention is what you're hearing a lot now, and that is called social distancing. Recommendations are at least 6 feet from another person, and that is, again, to limit the likelihood that the virus is transmitted through those respiratory droplets from person to person. We see that it's pretty contagious, so folks need to stand down. Now, the take-home message, so those are the 3 points. The take-home message is around why it's important for us and that this is an equal opportunity virus. It is important for Black and brown people because evidence suggests that those who have comorbidities, and that just means more than one disease, are more likely to suffer ill effects of COVID-19.
Dr. Sally Richardson, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on the Hutchinson Report Town Hall, the air, and sharing your expertise with us today on the Hutchinson Report.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you. That was Dr. Sally Richardson from Morehouse, a great school of public health there, and Dr. Sally Richardson and the staff at Morehouse. Beyond just COVID-19, they've been on the point for a long time, advocating, challenging, and, of course, holding public officials their feet to the fire for resourcing and all the other things that go with safeguarding public health. So, Bill, some strategies, some thoughts from you about how you would approach challenging all the agencies that would be dispersing this money to make sure we get our fair share.
It's a $64,000 question.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
it's
I
a
think
big
the
one.
bottom line is that this administration is more concerned about making sure that the major corporations and the rich come out of this unscathed than they are about taking care of regular people. The other day, when Trump said that they were going to send out checks to people, Senator Schumer raised concerns about this, which some people on Twitter, I think, completely misunderstood. Schumer was basically saying, and I agree, that it's not about the sending out of checks. Sure, everyone wants a check, but the bottom line is that people that are suffering as a result of what's happening need sustained income and help, not just a $2,400 check. Because when people get those checks, what they will do is that they're going to pay off their debts. And then they will have nothing if we do not come up with a system for sustaining people. And so I think that what we're talking about, and it's difficult because it's not just an economic crisis; it's an economic crisis in a time of plague. So many of the tactics that people would ordinarily use are much more difficult to do in an environment when we're supposed to be social distancing. So that means we have to be more creative. And so so one of the things that I'm thinking is that it's not that we should be remaining silent. There need to be organized phone-ins with our representatives, that we need to be loading the phones. We need to be loading the phone lines of the White House, Congress, and senators, et cetera, making our voices heard. We also need to be taking advantage of programs such as yours, that is getting into the media and having our voices heard. The anger, the fear, the frustration, all of these things need to be heard by representatives. And we need to be definitely thinking about what does this mean in November. We need to be thinking about political leadership that is elected in November, and we can't let that election be postponed, by the way. We have to elect people that are actually talking about a structural change in the economy. And this is the final point about this, Earl, that we need to learn from the 8 years of the Obama administration that it's not enough to get out of office, to remove from office a reactionary, in this case Trump. We have to make sure that whoever's elected, that we do not give them any space, we do not give them any permission to retreat. That's the biggest lesson from the Obama years, that this whole idea that many of us heard in 2008 and 2009, that you've got to give the brother a chance. No, there are no chances. There is no time. We're not going to give space. We're going to be right behind them so that they cannot turn around and retreat.
We'll be coming back to you again, and I'm sure with our good friend Ron Daniels, we'll be hitting this on WBAI. Billl Fletcher Jr., thanks again for joining us on the Hutchinson Report. Madison has been on the front line for a long time, pushing, advancing, stressing the need for African-American owned businesses, support, patronizing, enacting, startups, all the above, to ensure economic equity in America and beyond. And it's always, but not only that, Roger's also, in my opinion, one of the sharpest tools in the shed politically around. We love to go back and forth on Facebook, going back and forth, solving all the world's problems and political problems. Roger Madison, are you there?
Yes, I am, Earl. Thank you for that introduction.
Roger, let's get down to business. The theme of the show today on the Hutchinson Report has been how to fight something that's right up your line, how to fight and ensure, actually the key word is ensure, ensuring the resources that are going to come from the federal government, probably state and local too, but especially the federal government, how we make sure that we're front and center at the table to make sure that we are there, all the things we need, testing, treatment, but beyond that, the economic stimulus. Billl Fletcher talked about small businesses, working people that are losing their jobs, to make sure that we're there and getting properly, equitably resources. Your thought on that, Roger?
Well, Earl, you know me. I'm a pragmatist, and I have been watching what Nancy Pelosi sent over to the Senate, and pretty quickly she backed McConnell into a corner, and he had to pass what she sent over, which extended unemployment benefits and increased funding for SNAP and made sure that everybody gets free shots. There's no charge for that. Those kinds of things, working from the bottom up. And Chuck Schumer is now going to face this gauntlet that McConnell is going to come forward with the bailout for the corporate people and $1,200 for the rest of us, which is nothing.
Yeah.
But I heard Chuck this morning talk about a multiple point plan that significantly increases the benefits for people at the bottom over and above what Nancy offered. And my thought is that the CBC they might be working quietly behind the scenes, but they need to become a visible and vocal advocate for black people. There are 55 members of the CBC in the House of Representatives. They make up 25% of the Democratic caucus, almost 25%, 55 out of 232. If they stand firm and demand that we get taken care of, whatever McConnell comes out of the Senate with, it has to pass the House. And it won't pass the House without the support of the CBC. So we need to get serious and understand that we are in a fight for these resources. We just cannot allow our people to get trampled under airline bailouts and hotel bailouts and trillion-dollar funding into the banking community for liquidity. All of those things sound good on TV while our people are suffering here on the ground. And I would like to see, as a practical matter, the CBC speak as a loud and single voice and just become a roadblock, a hurdle for anything that happens unless it includes our people. That's what they can do practically.
I'm speaking once again for joining us today on the Hutchinson Report Town Hall there. Roger Madison, founder, iZania, Columbus, Ohio, and Mosley, president, National Action Network-L.A. Jonathan, are you there?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Earl?
Very, very good. Thanks for joining us today on the Hutchinson Report, Jonathan Mosley.
Yeah,
Jonathan, you know our theme today, fighting to ensure that the resources, we know there'll be billions, multi-billions, that will be released from the federal government over the next couple of weeks, probably next few days. They want to get the money out there fast. But as we well know, Jonathan, oftentimes the money goes not to us, working people, people of color, the poor, the underserved, but the big shots, banks, hotels, airlines, corporations. And we know what a lot of the CEOs do, buy back their own stock and pocket the dough. We wanted a plan on the part of the National Action Network to challenge elected officials, public officials here in the city and the county to make sure we get the dough, too.
Well, Earl, one of the things that we systematically continue to do is depend on somebody else to do for us when there are things that we have to do for ourselves. One of the things that we have a tendency to always do is we elect these people as our officials and supposedly to be our mouthpieces, speak on our behalf, and then we go sit down and watch them literally do nothing. They have done nothing for many years. Our communities have gone lacking in many things. We have to now not only let our voices be heard, but we have to, and our votes be heard, but we have to make sure that we stay consistent and making them accountable. We have a tendency to I've watched over the years, and having grown up in this city, to see the original politicians that really cared about the welfare of the people and how we were progressing and getting along, and then just watching it slowly deteriorate, and people are suffering so badly on so many issues. From education is bad, and of course you can't get a job that's going to be sufficient, and then it's going to affect us economically. We can't, and our plan and our goal is to make sure that our people, even if it means going down to their offices, to make them accountable, to speak up for us, because we can't afford. We really, literally, as a people, cannot afford to fall any further back on this economic situation. We're already impoverished in many areas, and there's a sense of, in some cases, hopelessness. We have to bring the hope back to our people that, if this is going to be a government for the people and by the people, then they have to listen to the people and not just the people up top that always take from us. I don't want to be too religious on this, but there is a passage in the Bible that says about those that have shall get more, and those that don't, that shall also be taken away. And it appears now that that's just what's happening. They're taking away every possible thing from us. I'm really tired of seeing these bailouts of these corporate mucky mucks that constantly get these enormous bonuses. I mean, you have a group of people that have this enormous salary, and then their bonuses are sometimes 2 and 3 times more than their original salary. And then you look at the people that are working in their companies and in their organizations, whatever it might be, you're cutting their hours, and then you're taking their wages, the wage theft. And then people are having to work multiple jobs just to survive. I'm not talking about making it, just to survive.
Well, absolutely. Doctor, I'm going to call you doctor because you are Reverend Dr. Jonathan Mosley, President, National Action Network-L.A. Jonathan, needless to say, this is going to be with us for a while, not just the medical part. That will come and that will go, as they all do. What won't come and won't go, we want to make sure it does, that we're right there. The economic blowback from this. As you have said and others have said, many people are suffering, even before COVID came along. And as we well know, after it's gone, they'll still be suffering. We're going to be right there at the table, and we know the National Action Network-L.A. will be there too. Jonathan, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Earl. Appreciate it, and keep the faith, brother.
Thank you, sir. Jonathan Mosley, President, National Action Network-L.A. Also, the Institute, another one of my favorites. We do, I don't know, been next 10, 15 minutes, AA's trying to give him all the accolades. Books coming out. He does his own talk show on WBAI in New York, our sister station. And he is the president of the Institute of the Black World. And I'll get the title of his book in just a minute, but I got to get him on first. Dr. Ron Daniels. Ron, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Delighted to be with you on the air and to be finally on your show. Very often I'm in situations where I'm not able to be on the show, so you're a part of my dream team. Along with Billl Fletcher, we're doing political analysis and trying to figure these things out. So it's glad to have the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today.
Well,
yeah. But first of all, even though you've dealt with the health piece, I have to say that that's one of the areas that the Institute of the Black World 21st Century is deeply concerned about. I was just on an emergency call last night with any range of organizations, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, black social workers, NPA, because we do have to really take this crisis seriously. There's a lot of, you may have been dealing with it, misinformation, disinformation, myths. We can't get it because we have melanin, all these kind of things. We have to take it seriously. So one of the things that we're doing is aggregating people, National Medical Association, National Black Nurses, and we'll be sending people to you as well to get the facts out there and to let black people know that this is serious, that it has catastrophic implications. Going back to looking to 1918, I can remember my father talking about how many members of our family we lost or he lost, and in the flu epidemic of 1918. So that's the first thing. But secondly, I think that in general terms, black elected officials, the Congressional Black Caucus, and others, and the Democrats even, are pretty much on point in this regard. And so I think that when we look at the divide between the Democrats and the Republicans, and one of the reasons why we do say there is a difference, clearly as your guest from Columbus, Ohio was pointing out, I mean, clearly the Democrats are pushing for a bottom-up approach, and that bottom-up approach, includes obviously black, poor, and working people. And by the way, not only is it the IHOP restaurant where people have a defined job, there's a whole category of the gig economy, quote unquote, that's out there. The Uber drivers, the people who are doing other kinds of work, who aren't in that picture. So we do collectively have to be pushing for a bottom-up approach that will ensure that everybody at that bottom is taken care of. And obviously, but inside of that, we want to make sure that black people and people of color and others, are taken care of. And what I think the other component of this is that this has exposed the raw, ugly. It's like Katrina. It's shown again the devastating impacts of inequality and the need for drastic changes across the board, economic included. So the $1 trillion, the third package, most economists are saying that's not enough. That you're going to eventually there's going to be a need for somewhere in the neighborhood of $3, $4, maybe even $5 trillion in order to actually make sure that people are made whole and that there can be a resurgence of the economy once the coronavirus or CVX-19 has surpassed, and it will surpass if people first and foremost do what they need to do on the medical side, and we have to take that seriously, or it will be even more devastating. So I think that's the second point. Third point is, I agree with Bill that there's a need for talking to our community about these issues, but also how we just take care of ourselves. I'm not sure I would agree with Bill, however, that's the role of the Congressional Black Caucus or elected leadership necessarily, except at the local level. The question is, where are the voices? And I'm sure they're stunned at this stage and are trying to figure out what to do. But I would think that we would have a united front and the voice of our civil rights, human rights, and faith organizations speaking in one voice, talking about how to organize our community, talking about how it is we need to relate to each other and those means and methods by which we can be a community, whether it's checking on our neighbors in a safe way, whether it's being on the Internet, and a lot of our people are not on the Internet, but to the degree they are, making sure our seniors are taken care of. I would like to see the Urban League, the NAACP, National Action Network, Rainbow Push, a range of other organizations, speaking on one voice about that and deploying, to the degree that they can, their messengers and their folk out to be the organizers in our community to begin to talk about how we knit ourselves. And in so doing, also looking at the possibility of an agenda moving forward, because what this says is, beyond this crisis, we have got to be organizing for fundamental kinds of changes in this society, which, and some of these issues were being talked about in this current political campaign. But the objective, first and foremost, of getting rid of this, you're talking about malfeasance. We're looking at malfeasance in the White House right now. And so that becomes the existential first objective. But beyond that, that can't just be our only focus. We have got to say beyond that, we are going to be organizing and mobilizing ourselves to seize this moment as an opportunity to push drastic, fundamental, transformative change in this country.
Dr. Ron Daniels, my good friend, my co-host, I like to say that, with our companion station in New York, WBAI, President, Institute of the Black World, and his new book, which he's knocking them dead with. And Ron, when you come west again, you know my standing offer. We'll have you on KPFK and we'll do a book signing for you. The Vision.
We'd be be glad to do that. Because I just want to thank you again. This book would not have been possible without you. You helped me get it done. I really appreciate it.
You're too kind, Ron. Let me give it the title again. You can get it, by the way, Amazon online. The Vision and Mission of Dr. Ron Daniels. Also, the website. Go to it. you need to punch it up. Great information there. Institute of the Black World. Dr. Daniels, thanks again for joining us. All right. Good cheer. We're shifting back, and for our listening audience, we're doing national and local. Our next guest, Jan Perry. Jan Perry, former Los Angeles City Council. By the way, Leroy, Jan Perry was a city council person over in that district, the great 9th district, where you every week gorge on your breakfast at the Dunbar Hotel. And Jan Perry was instrumental in bringing back the Dunbar, that historic hotel. Also, you like that. Big cheer on that. And Jan was also former director of Mayor Garcetti's Economic and Workforce Development Department. Jan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. How are you?
Very good, very good. Jan, we've been focusing today on the Hutchinson report, really on one aspect. We've had the medical experts over the last few days talking a lot about preventative measures, what could be done, and so forth. We got that. But we're focusing today on something a little bit different on the Hutchinson report, something right up your line, the economy. We know, I just gave an example of a restaurant I went into, speaking of restaurants the other day, 25 workers 2 weeks ago, down to 2 workers this week. The manager doesn't know what he's going to do. What are we going to do? You know, these are working people, low-income people. They have families. They've got obligations. What do we do about that? Now, $1 trillion plus in 1, 2, 3 phases of an economic stimulus bill. So the question that we're dealing with, Jan, on the show today, and for those that are just joining us, fighting and ensuring that when the resources are ladled out, testing, treatment, the medical end, we got all of that, but also to help those folk in the restaurants, in the entertainment industry, in the travel industry, in all of the industries that are suffering, i.e. job loss and economic displacement. So, Jan, your thoughts on that? How we make sure we fight for those resources?
Well, you have to do it. The restaurants are probably the most challenging because they have the least organized network. And I'm thinking of restaurants that are in neighborhoods like Delicious at the Dunbar or, those small mom and pop organizations that may not be a member of the California Restaurant Association or professional organizations where they have an advocate working on their behalf very actively. And so those are the ones that I'm concerned that will go under because they really don't have an organized voice. And so I guess, based on my life experience and professional experience, you have to rely on somebody locally, if it's your local elected official, your congressperson, to start that letter writing, start those emails.
And final question on this. Now, as a former city council person, and you know the workings and ins and outs of the city council from your many years on the city council, what would you do now as a city council person faced with this crisis, all the things that you just talked about, dealing with small businesses, economic, the supplies, employment, support, and all of that? What would you as a city council person and recommend city council persons do? Not just simply shut everything down. That's not enough. But what would you do to deal with that, to make sure working people and small businesses from the city council, that aid and support is there that's coming from the federal government to ensure that? How would you approach it?
I'd probably join quickly with the state and the Employment Development Department to have emergency protocols set up and, ways for people to come in and apply for assistance very quickly in parking lots, space it out so, people are 6 feet apart, and then the people who are working are masked and covered and safe with, computers, laptops out in the field so we can process these requests and then work out some arrangements with some of the lending institutions so that people can, take whatever subsidy or emergency funds that they receive and to be able to use it nearly immediately. This all comes out of what I've been saying for the last couple of years, and I've often felt like I was howling in the wind about, a Marshall Plan for homelessness and then, using Skid Row as the epicenter for everything. So, you can imagine that it's kind of frustrating to have to sit here and watch all of this. And I'm grateful for the chance to be able to say this to you, Earl, because I hope that people will listen now. But that's what I would do immedially. Bond with the state, set up the protocols, use the state as the disbursement system, and do an all point bulletin to independently owned and operated businesses, because you'll be able to find them through their licenses, through the departments of finance, conditional use permits. There are ways to find them if we work together, not only with our planning departments, but at the state level too, and get ready to set up a field operation and to plan on doing it quickly, because these people don't have much time.
Jan, and you know what? We know the city council's listening. Jan, thanks again for joining us today on the Hutchinson Report.
Earl, you take care. Talk soon. Be safe.
Thank you. That was Jan Perry, former Los Angeles City Council member and also a former director of Mayor Eric Garcetti's Economic and Workforce Development Department. So, Reverend Al Sharpton on the line now, as promised. And 1 second before I bring the Rev on, I just want to read one thing, kind of give a context for that piece of information that people might not know out there. This past week, the Reverend Al Sharpton and a number of civil rights leaders, Mark Morial, CEO of the Urban League, and we had the Black Women's Roundtable, Melanie Campbell, Derek Johnson, the NAACP, and, of course, the National Action Network, jumped on something right away, Angela, and that something was this. The $1 trillion plus, I just gave a little bit of a snippet, too, of money that's coming out of Washington, federal, state, and local. We want to make sure that when the money is there, testing, treatment, and all of the aid and support that's got to come to working people that are just being slammed by this, that we are front and center at the table. Reverend Sharpton, are you there? Reverend Al.
Yes, I'm here.
Reverend Al, greetings once again, joining us on the Hutchinson Report. This time we're not shifting. I started to say a little bit from the political scene, but it's politics. Reverend Al, you had the conference call this week with top civil rights leaders, of course you, right there at the table. Big issue, the resources. Share with our listening audience, Reverend Al, some of the things that you have planned through the National Action Network and the Coalition of Civil Rights Leaders to make sure, challenging the administration and Congress, when the money is there, we have to be front and center to get our share of it.
We have said that you cannot really have a national drive to deal with testing unless you also factor in underserved communities. When the president announced they were putting 2,000 clinics, that they were going to bring the testing into 2,000 clinics, where are they and how accessible are they to black and brown communities? So we petitioned both Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer to make sure that they are also inclusive of our community and that the tests are run in our community. Secondly, we've said, what about the homeless? We have homeless people all over the country. You certainly have it in L.A., people everywhere sleeping under bridges and all. If you're not testing them, not only is it a humanitarian issue, it's also an issue of you can recycle a problem of the coronavirus breaking out again because it could be picked up from being transmitted from somebody homeless and the incarcerated. How are you going to tell somebody incarcerated to have social distancing of 6 feet and you're in a 6 by 12 jail? Most of whom are in jail have not even been convicted of a crime. They're waiting to go to trial. You may get acquitted and come out with coronavirus because they're not testing you in jail. So we made those appeals. We called the White House, and to my surprise, Trump called me back. And I raised it to Trump yesterday in a phone call with Trump. And I think that we're going to continue putting pressure on the Congress. We have another call this afternoon on New York time, Eastern time, at 3 o'clock with Schumer to make sure that this is in the package as they negotiate the second rounds of funds.
By Reverend Sharpton, your thought about this whole notion that, and people are aroused about that, Money just can't go to the big shots out there. There's got to be mechanisms to make sure it goes to those that are hurt the most, the tens of millions, not just a handful of working people. National Action Network, I know you'll be front and center on that. Can you give us some of the specifics that NAN is going to be doing to press Schumer and Trump? The money has got to go to us specifically in these ways, Reverend Al.
I think that what we have said in National Action Network and the other three organizations is in an election year, the senators and congressmen must be monitored, that we cannot vote for you in November if you don't vote for us in terms of this stimulus package. Because if you're only stimulating the airlines and major corporations, where you had in 2008, you bailed out everybody but the ones that were the victims, the ones that suffered from prime mortgages, the ones that suffered from the layoffs and the in many cases millions of people unemployed. Here you have people, one, that are poor, that are working in service industries that have lost their job. Many of them will not be rehired. Many of them were immigrants that were undocumented. Many of them in our community that live paycheck to paycheck. Many in the service industries that survive just off tips, that you can't replace that money because as long as they're out of work, they can't make ends meet because they were dealing with a base salary and living basically off of the tips. How do you bring that back when they cannot be on the job to even get the tips? So we want to see direct money go to many of the citizens who were impacted economically and will take months to recover, if at all.
Reverend, you are going to be telling the president, Reverend Al, on that.
What we're telling the president, and I started it in the one call he made yesterday to me, was that you've got to support and have your Majority Leader Mitch McConnell support that the giveaway money that they call giveaway to those that will be compensated must be based on income and need. Because what they've done in terms of saying that even with the major corporations, they're saying that we will give certain amounts of money up to a certain dollar. But if you've got a major corporation that has over 500 employees, that doesn't apply, which means Walmart and major companies like Ford and them, they are not covered by that. We're saying you need to cover everybody, and the most money should be given to those that need it the most. So some should get maybe 1,000, but others should get 3,000. It should be a scale based on need, not giving a blanket amount to everybody, because everybody's not having the same kind of suffering and need the same kind of recovery.
Reverend Al Sharpton, always a pleasure. Reverend Al, thanks again for joining us on the Hutchinson Report. Thanks again, Rev.
All right.
Najee Ali, president of Project Islamic Hope. And Najee, before I went, as always, to the Hutchinson Report Town Hall there, how you doing?
Thank you for having me on once again, as you can continue to be on the front lines, sharing and discussing important information and what's going on in our community.
Well, Najee, you know, we have a small, modest platform here, and we try to do the best we can. Let's get down to Islamic Hope and local civil rights leaders. If you could have a checklist, Najee, of 1, 2, 3 things that you essentially would certainly pound away with local officials, elected officials, and beyond, what would they be in terms of dealing with the economic blowback and making sure we get our resources properly?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the callers who were on before me and your guests, I agree with them. Reverend Sharpton did a great job in essentially expressing what's needed nationally for Black people across the nation. And I know locally, I have the honor and privilege of being part of a coalition of South LA leaders led by Robert Cicito, who's the CEO of the Community Bill organization. His office is in Lamert Park, and we had a press conference Thursday demanding just that, more resources for our community in South LA. As we know, the governor does have a budget that he is trying to make sure is allocated. So we are, calling upon more resources in South LA because we think it's important that we get in front of this, Earl. We want to have resources that ensure our people are being able to get fed, but also, just as importantly, have an economic stimulus to ensure those folks who aren't working, who have lost their jobs, can make sure that they get funded immediately with some type of check. So that's something that we're also calling upon. And the last thing is we want to ensure that, Black people are able to get tested, because the thing that concerns me, Earl, and you know this very well, is that NBA ball players, these multimillionaires, are getting tested immediately. But what about the average, working class person in South L.A. that may need to get a test, who's not able to get tested as quickly, if at all? So those are just a few of the things that we called upon. And the name of our group is the Community Response System of South L.A. We do have a Facebook page that your listeners can go to. It's the Community Response System of South L.A. Please go to our Facebook page for more information.
Well, G, any final thoughts about where we go with this? Focusing on resources.
We're just asking everyone who lives in South L.A., if you want to get more information on resourcing, testing, and how you can be a part of this coalition, please go to our Facebook page. It's the Community Response System of South Los Angeles. Or if you don't have internet access, call Community Build in Leimert Park. The CEO is Robert Cicito. He is the leader of this effort in bringing all community-based organizations in South LA to come together collectively, as opposed to always working in silos. So we want to thank Robert Cicito of Community Build in Leimert Park for his leadership. And once again, Earl, thank you for giving us a platform to share vital and critical information on KPFK.
Thank you. Najee Ali, needless to say, there's always an issue, and you're always on the front line, as we well know. We'll be back again because we're going to be monitoring this very, very carefully. And we're going to, any information that we have, not rumors, not gossip, not misinformation and disinformation, God knows there's a lot of that out there, but factual information to help people. Thanks again, Najee Ali, President, Project Islamic Hope.
Thank you.
Leroy, the inscription on the king of Persia, this too shall pass. Keep that in mind. It will. It always does. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you,
Leroy,
Angela. Thank you, Leroy. Thank you. Where's Wendell? Wendell and Vino. Thank you, mask and all. Till next week, you've been listening to the Hutchinson Report.
Like Bubba.
The Hutchinson Report.
I'm not sure you'll have 47 Democrats
with Earl Afari Hutchinson
that will not break ranks and vote to convict Donald Trump.
Angela Hoffman.
Hoffman, you live in the district too.
They need to be transparent. I think you should run.
Pat Hoffman with her USA hat on today. Sure.
Tune into the Hutchinson Report, Saturdays at 9 a.m. right here on KPFK.